Welcome to the Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast, where critical thinking meets practical solutions in the modern workplace. In today's episode, we dive into the complexities and real-world implications of return to office (RTO) policies. Andreas and Tim explore a recent academic study titled Return to Office and Tenure Distribution, which analyzes the impact of RTO policies on employee tenure and seniority at major tech firms including Microsoft, SpaceX, and Apple. They will guide us through the data-driven findings of this study and discuss its broader implications on corporate strategies and employee dynamics. Let's dive in.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast. This is Andreas Weeman. I am here with my world-famous best-selling co-author, Tim Keefe. Tim, you want to give our audience the topic for today?
Well, I guess famous is better than infamous. And what was it last week? Oh, co-conspirators we were.
Co-conspirator.
All right. Yeah. So today we have a really, really interesting topic. I mean, at least one we think is interesting. It's a follow-up to a piece of academic work that was published in May, so very recent, and it's titled Return to Office and Tenure Distribution by the following gentlemen: David Van Dyke, Florian Concilius, and Austin Wright. And they did a data analytics study around the implications of return to office policies, post the pandemic. They looked specifically at three large US tech companies, Microsoft, SpaceX, and Apple. It looked at 260 million resumes, and then they look at how are these RTO policies impacting the employees' tenure and seniority levels. So, one of the things I like about seeing these types of reports out is allows us to move beyond the gut level response, which is what we see all the time in the headquarters, right? Or in the headlines, I want people back in the office because that's how they learn from each other. Okay. And that's a gut reaction, and it's not tied to any data. So let's now talk about data. So with that, that may put me over to my much smarter co-conspirator half here, Andreas.
Yeah, I'm definitely the brains of this operation, which is
That's
quite scary. Sure. That's pretty scary now that I even just say that verbally out loud. But no, in all seriousness, it's a good topic, and this is, you and I are kind of data nerds anyway, so it's exciting when we see a piece of, documentation come out that uses empirical data and looks at just statistics and statistical probability. So I highly encourage everyone to look at this report. We're going to link to it in the comments or in the posting on LinkedIn. But they use several different statistical approaches on the actual data itself to use, and I'm saying this up front before I jump into the big subject or the actual topical subject, because I think this is where a lot of companies are missing where they can practically use AI and machine learning models. And so one of the things they use is bootstrapping, which is a statistical procedure that samples a data source and then it recreates or simulates other data sources within that parameter. So if you have a small data set, you can recreate that as if you have a 100 people company, you can recreate it as if you were 1,000 or 100,000 with a high level of statistical probability in the outcome. And so if you want to talk about looking at scenario planning and things like that, that's where you should be looking at your machine learning models. So anyways, the findings were pretty, they weren't surprising, because Tim, you and I have been talking about this for the past couple of years. I challenge anyone to go look at our initial SDSS podcast or even our old banter cast where we were talking about this. And when you start returning back to office, and in the first place, a lot of companies, I don't think they optimize the move, from the pandemic of how they do things in an office in an in-person environment, and how do you recreate that with similar outcomes virtually. Well, they just did the practices they did in an office, and they try to do it over Zoom or try to do it virtually. It's a different competency, a different skill set that's needed to be able to effectively communicate and coach and evaluate and collaborate than it is not being in person, right? So that's one point you've got to consider. Then the second one is when they started mandating back to office. And I think this was for a variety of reasons. One, they have a lot of stranded costs because you have real estate costs that eventually started kicking in and empty offices that need to be paid for. I think that's some of the motivation too. I'm sure there's some data out there. I can't quote it right now. But hey, if you find some, put it in the comments and the links. But as we start to go back to the return to office, and especially this time period in 2022 that they studied, you started to see a direct impact of high tenured people leaving the companies. And what that means when you have a reduction in tenure and seniority is ultimately what they found. You have that tribal knowledge that does have a place and importance within organizations. But as that starts to exit and that long tenure that was built up, they've seen iterations and they've seen different things in the company that they're able to, facilitate with today's circumstances and what they're seeing. And if you don't have a conducive environment to be able to do that in, let alone the employees that are willing to participate in that, then guess what? I almost had to get a bleep there. They're going to leave. And that's what this report is showing. They've seen that at these companies that mandated the return to office and looked at when they mandated the return to office and then where it's at currently.
Well, and I think, going back to the reason why return to office has become such an interesting hot potato, right? One is companies do have stranded real estate costs. In some cases, they own the building or they have a 10-year or extended lease, and they're trying to get value out of that. There's also the socioeconomic pressure that's being put on a lot of these companies by the communities. When you think about, San Francisco in particular, where we have, I don't know what the current number in, but it was approaching 40% for, vacant office space in the downtown corridor. And you have all of those businesses around that are so dependent, the lunch places, all of that economic challenges. So you've got mayors and you've got governors, knocking on the door saying, please, please, please go back to the way things were. But of course, what does that look like? At the end of the day, a company still has to run a business. But what we're talking about, I think, is this very personal interaction of like, holy crap, for 3 years, I did my job working from home. And guess what? In many cases, my performance was at or better than what it was when I was working in the office. Okay. And we also have the situation where you have a whole workforce, right? 3 years worth of new people entering the job market that never worked in the office before. Now, suddenly they're being told.
That's the key.
Right.
That is the key, Tim. You have this huge, so you have a shift of people that worked in the office and know what it was like us, because we came up and working in offices. And now they went home, and now you have them, they're leaving, the tenured people are leaving, and you have this whole huge workforce that their only association with they're starting their professional careers is working at home. That environment, right. I think that's huge.
Well, and then, okay, so now you have that. And then what's the other piece is the real economic impact to the employee of return to office. And I don't think this gets talked about enough. But, just think about, we've got time. So for most people, even a moderate commute would be 30 minutes each way. Like a lot of people would be happy with that. And, many of us for a long, long time, lived with much longer commutes. And I think closer to 45 minutes to an hour. And that's whether it's some public transportation, you're driving your own car, Ubering, carpooling, whatever. But it's time out of the day that in some cases you can't work, or some people are able to work, but you're not at home, you're transiting to a work location. Then you get to work, okay, you're at work, and in many cases you're doing exactly the same thing at work that you were doing at home. You're sitting down, logged in, you're attending virtual meetings in many cases because even these companies are using virtual tools because they're in different locations. And then on top of that, lunch every day. So you put in, $10 a day for lunch. Well, that all adds up, and people are going, well, holy crap, that's $10,000 a year that I have to pay for with after-tax money. And we have this client that's doing this, and they have a whole bunch of what we talked about, these people who've never worked in the office before. And they're saying, okay, well, are you paying for my childcare? What if I don't like the person in the cubicle next to me? And things that those of us who grew up in this space just never thought about. It was just like, that's what it was. And now people are, really being the emperor wears no clothes because they're asking the question. And I think, look, I think return to office or I think working collaboratively in office environments can be very effective if they're structured around achieving the benefits of that collaboration. But just to have people come in, the whole badge swipe thing that people are talking about right now. You and I have a mutual friend, very senior executive for a bank in New York. He's forced to come into the office 3 days a week to do exactly the same thing he does at home because his boss is in Dallas. Right. And,
Yep.
He's working with his boss virtually, whether he's doing it from the office in Manhattan or if he's doing it from his home. But what you have now is this, and I'm sure you've read about it, this badge swipe thing. People come in, they swipe their badge so they get credit for it. You go have coffee, talk to a few friends, and maybe that collaboration is good. I don't know, but it's a pretty high cost because I've probably lost a day or half a day of somebody actually doing the work that is being tasked to them.
Right.
Anyway,
Well, then
it's fascinating.
You limit your access to talent then, because then it's within a radius of wherever that office
Yeah,
is located, right?
probably 30
And like,
miles from
look,
that office, and that's it.
right.
That's where you can hire
Well,
from.
well, if you think about it, a lot of people moved during the pandemic because they could work from home. So they moved from, within commutable distance to their office to virtual, wherever the hell they wanted to. But see, here's the thing that a lot of people, I don't know, like I haven't seen any study or any consideration given to this. And you and I talk about this all the time in different ways, but I think it applies here as well. And that's the environmental complexity, or what we call the environmental complexity score, right? And that's what are the circumstances going on in the world that are impacting directly, your business, for example. And so if you go back to what you were saying earlier about, local politicians and cities and state governments, incentivizing people to go back to commutable works because of all of the economic development that comes with that. Yeah, there's validity in that, but that's also how it's been done for decades now. And so how does adoption or evolution occur? Like even in something like this, you got to find a way forward. And it can't be the answer was for COVID, for the pandemic. Oh, we'll just do it over Zoom. We'll do the same crappy training that we have in the office that we
God,
can,
yeah.
do. We can just do that over Zoom. And then managers point to, decision makers and executives point to, oh, well, productivity is down. Well, yeah, productivity is down because one, you're losing all your tenured people in return to office, and you're measuring in different ways. And so
Yeah.
anytime something in a variable is introduced or a change occurs, I always question it. I go, okay, well, what was it prior to? What is it now? What is the difference? If we normalize that, what would have been in the old formula, et cetera?
Yeah.
You've got to analyze all of those things to actually get an accurate reading on fair comparison, if that makes sense.
Right.
And I see that all over the place, even with decision making. And I think we're at a pivotal point where companies that figure out how to balance this, I think are going to be the winners, the clear winners. And then you're going to have emulators, afterwards as people, trial and error basically and pilot things out. But the ones that figure this out, just like using Gen AI, machine learning and things like that, they're going to be the clear winners and the front runners in, the midpoint of the decade that we're in now. And I think that's going to be the new pathway forward.
Well, and I think, I think when we go back and look at the study, what would you say if you, like if you were the pundit now and you say you get now data to support this, what would be your recommendation to companies that are evaluating return to office or work at home or hybrid models? Do you think there's stuff in here that they should take into account for that, or they should just keep on going on their path?
Yeah, I would say this is another data point. And so obviously it's combined by several data points in their analysis, right? But every business has to look at what is unique to their business. Everybody likes to try to, I don't know, cheat code or something like that. It's not. You got to go in and look at your business.
Yeah.
And like, look, there's some businesses, honestly, they are better off in the office. 100% they're better off in the office than they are virtually. But one, that's, I think, what I've observed in minority. But I see this aversion to a company just saying, oh, well, we need to get back to the office because of productivity. That is like the most vanilla answer ever. You've got to
Yeah.
look at the people. Like we've lost sight, regardless of the industry or the vertical, et cetera, we've lost sight of the people that make businesses successful, the people that come up with the resiliency and the new ideas on how to keep things moving or keep things stable. Like stability is not common anymore now. You have these ups and downs and peaks and valleys with companies when we used to have, maybe there were kind of slow adopters, but there was a level of stability, because it was built on a strong foundation. And I just don't think companies are looking at it from an individual perspective and like employee levels. Can frontline workers be work from home? What is the risk? What are the deltas that you've got to solve for? And is there certain
Right.
executives? Yes, you want to have them in the office to collaborate. And even then, can you do a hub and spoke model where they're in the office, a couple times a month or whatever the frequency is? But you need to evaluate it on a position and people level, departmental level, and see what the impact is, and then observe it, monitor it,
Right.
and see what the outcome was, and then kind of go from there. It's not there's not a hack, there's not a
Yeah.
hack to just do this and everything works out.
No, I agree. And again, I think it's not one size fits all ever, but I think one thing that came out of the pandemic, I personally feel, is that now we had this amazing piece of social engineering, social experiment, right? Which was everybody had to go work from home. We had to do education from home. And it worked for some people, clearly failed for other people. But people are amazingly adaptable. So I agree with you. I think that one, it really opened up the opportunity for people who hadn't already drunk the Kool-Aid around the idea of virtual work teams to say, you can really do this. And it could make your hiring pool global at that point, which is a massive change, which we've taken advantage of in my organization. But at the same time, I do agree with you. I mean, there is the personal interaction, and I think there's that ability to try and do that. I mean, for us, it's the idea of getting together as an organization, a couple of times a year as money allows, to have those meet the person that you've been talking to virtually for 3 years or 4 years in some cases, and engage with them. I mean, I remember being in it, and when I was doing consulting, we had a team of people that I met with every week, or more often sometimes. Knew these people very well virtually, and I never having met them face to face. I remember being in the hotel, and the guy in front of me started to check in, and I was like, I know that voice. And it was one
Yep.
of my key coworkers that I've been working with for 4 years. But we'd never met face to face before. So it was kind of interesting. Um, but I think, in summary here, what we're seeing is that with at least these three companies that this report looked at, which are very large technology companies, you have to understand what the impact of RTO is. And if you're okay with those impacts, that's fine. But you are probably going to see some of your more higher tenured people, which is what they looked at. Just looked at tenure. They didn't look at contribution level. But I think if you flipped it, you'd probably find out the challenge is that when you push people to in a situation where they're uncomfortable, they're going to start looking at alternatives. And the challenge often is when you do that, the people that are most likely to have alternatives are your most qualified people, the people, your biggest contributors. We used to see this a lot when companies were right sizing or doing large layoffs, even back, way, way, way before even .com. As soon as a company would announce, oh, we're going to do layoffs or right sizing or whatever, who's the first people that are hitting the fax machines with their resumes? Now I'm really dating myself, but that's what you would see. It would be a line at the fax machine, and it would be like, holy crap, those are my top contributors that are standing there ready to fax their resume to the world, because they're the ones who have alternatives. And then you're left with the people that aren't of interest to your competitors and to your other people, and there's probably a reason for that. So anyway, I think
Yeah.
from my perspective, the point was, you got to really look at the impacts in a couple of different ways, not just this baseline gut reaction and we got to get people back to the office. It's a very complex problem, and and you're absolutely right, not one size fits all. And you have to look at the bigger picture also, I think, at times. So, I mean, that's
Yeah.
my closure on it. But I mean, what do you think?
Agreed. No, that was like a 5 minute conclusion there. I don't think I have any points left to cover at this point.
Well, you were
Oh,
doing a lot of talking early, so I figured I had to catch up. We'll see what the
touche.
AI says in terms of words per minute. Um,
There you go. There you go. No,
all right.
you covered all the right points. It's a complex issue, and it's going to take a good collaborative effort to resolve the I don't know, just collaboratively what needs to happen, where it needs to happen, and it's going to be
Yeah.
unique for every company, every individual in those companies, departments, etc. So
Well,
my
and
best
and then
advice:
there's
collaborate, work
well,
together,
I
and
think
figure it out.
yeah, and I think the bigger economic things are not to be pushed to the side either. I mean, I live here in San Francisco, and it's been interesting to see. We lost a lot of businesses during the pandemic, but we're seeing a lot of businesses come back, particularly restaurants and service businesses, but they're kind of coming back in different neighborhoods. And what we're seeing is where neighborhoods that were like super hot with the technology companies, right before the pandemic, and you couldn't get a parking spot down there now. That's where the vacancies are, and other parts of the city are starting to boom. And we're seeing, like I call them, gourmet ghettos pop up in really what used to be really quiet neighborhoods. Because guess what? People are now working from home in those neighborhoods, and what do they want to do? They want to go out for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and they want more services. We're seeing the Kinkos up here, or FedEx. You go in the middle of the day, there's a line 30 people long, and you go,
Yeah.
wow. So anyway,
Is that the place you took me to when I was in San Fran a few weeks ago?
yeah, like that the underdogs place where we went, and
Yeah.
you had the famous cheeseburger burrito. But I mean, that little area, if you went there 7 years ago, there was a diner on that corner, and now there's like 7 restaurants and 3 bars just in that one block.
Well,
So
yeah, but to your point, like people are finding a way. Like there's a really famous movie that I don't know that everybody is going to know. It's called Jurassic Park.
yeah,
And one of the best quotes from that movie is business finds a way.
yeah, yeah.
All right,
Nature finds
it's
a
not
way.
exactly like business finds a way.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's what he meant. I think it was life
Well,
finds a way. But anyways, I'm,
yeah,
I'm kind
and
of being a smart ass with it. But yeah, business will find a way
no.
if you give them the opportunity.
Well, I mean, look, during the pandemic was perfect. People found a way, right? I remember being in Hawaii, and
Yeah.
we took an Uber, and the guy was talking about, what his business was, and he had no work. He was a driver, no work. So what does he do? He and his family used to be in the sewing business. He used to run a sewing factory. So he got his friends together, and he started sewing up masks, for people. And then they
Yeah.
had, beautiful masks that they were selling, and they start selling them to all the different hotel chains. And he goes, I'm making more money doing this than I ever made driving. And so
Exactly.
again, people take their capabilities. And I talked to a woman, a bartender in New York one time. She said, you know what, when things dried up and I had no work, she was a workout person. She built out a TikTok. She had tens of thousands of followers on TikTok. She goes, I'm making more money on TikTok. I still bartend just because I like to talk to people, but I don't make enough money here to make it worth my time. And I was like, wow. Again, adoption, right? Like,
Exactly.
and now people are exercising new skill sets. A lot of people got into creative stuff like what we're doing, only better probably. And then, doing all the cool things that they probably wanted to do, but felt they were constrained from doing.
They were boxed in. Yeah,
Yep.
that's the resiliency factor in my mind
Yep.
is people can be resilient if they have the right circumstances and chance and confidence, but never underestimate the resiliency of people.
So, and I think it goes back to one of our core tenets of our business, which is you got to take care of your people. You got to listen to your people. You got to give your people the opportunity to develop, and, to your point, try and get them out of the box. Because if they see that you're allowing them to develop the skills that they have inherently, they'll be your employees for life. And it's not an
Yeah.
employee relationship based on, you know, fair days work for fair days pay, but it's a relationship built on, hey, I wanted you to develop as a human being. And in that relationship, I want you to work for me. But I mean,
It's
we could go on for
symbiotic.
hours. Yeah, we could go on for
Yeah.
hours about individuals that we work with that have just been amazing when they're given the opportunity. So I guess to close out for today, and Andreas, thanks so much for joining me again. I know you've been busy the last couple of them, but uh, I think what we're seeing here is, look, at the end of the day, unfortunately, it's not as simple as yes or no. It is this right for you? Is this right for your organization? Is this right for your employees? And is it right for your community? And you got to balance all of those things. And as you think about return to office.
Yep. Agreed.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. And thanks for spending a fairly long time with us. This is a passionate topic for us, and we'll continue to talk about it. If you have comments, complaints, but think about alternative topics you'd like us to talk about, please let us know in the comments. We're now on Spotify and looking to expand and see more and more of you as subscribers.
Yep. Well said. Have a great week, everybody. Take care.